Donald Trump took to the campaign trail yesterday. He started to work at McDonald's. Quite a few meme-tastic moments that came out of it. Let's take a listen.
I'm going for a job right now at McDonald's. I really wanted to do this all my life.
He's a wealthy guy. He owns a lot of McDonald's. That's great. Thank you. Okay. I like every ounce of it, everything. But I do like the French fries where I'll be working. I listened to Kamala. She said it was so hot. It was so hot. It was such a tough job. But don't you have a man that's been doing it for many years with the French fries, right?
I want to learn everything.
We're touched by a human hand. Nice and clean. Of course, my hands are nice and clean. This guy's a good instructor.
I appreciate it.
Wow. I'm going to give a really big one so that, look at that, they're just pouring out of there. A good-looking family. How did you produce those good-looking kids? Oh, they look like the wife. They look like the wife. How are you? Nice to see you. That's great. Thank you, man. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's an amazing business. It's an amazing country. And we're going to make America greater than ever before.
I mean, you know, what do you would say about that? It was pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
So what I saw, Krystal, was that in the back of his head for years, he's wondered, do they get their grubby hands on my fries? And so he finally found, it was like a moment of clarity for him to see that nobody touched him. But I mean, look, meme-wise, come on, it's everywhere. It's one of the biggest campaign photos, I would say outside of the assassination photo, I've seen that one spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
Like, you know, literally everywhere.
Look,
so there you go.
I may hate the man. This is a brilliant bit of political theater. It is. I mean, you know, we'll get to the substance, the fact that he won't raise the minimum wage, that during his administration, he undercut the ability of workers like these ones to be able to organize. But just on the level of like pure political theater, yeah, he positions himself as like the working class man's billionaire. There he is working at McDonald's. It's also like a nice stop to the base. He didn't talk too much about this, but he got this in somewhat. He doesn't believe that Kamala ever actually worked at McDonald's. Yes. So it's like throwing some red meat to the base as well. I mean, what can you say?
Yeah, what can you say?
Man has an authentic love for McDonald's food. You definitely know that much.
It's true. Allow me to read an Andy Warhol quote, apparently from the 1960s. It says, "I always thought the president would do so much to help change images. If president would go to a public bathroom in the Capitol and have TV cameras film him cleaning the toilets and saying, why not? Somebody's got to do it. It would do so much for the morale of the people who do a wonderful job of keeping the toilets clean. It's a wonderful thing that they're doing." So people were like, oh, this is Trump's apotheosis of the Andy Warhol political theory that was going around. I don't think it's that deep. It's like you said. I mean, really what it is, and I saw a friend of mine, Ruben, on Twitter made an interesting point. I'm curious what you think, is that Trump's camp actively helps to dispel a lot of the negative imagery of him by Democrats, as in it's very hard to imagine like a Trump dictator when he's also like at McDonald's just serving fries. And I thought that actually might be the most astute part of it. We're about to show the whole Arnold Palmer thing, but like there's something hilarious about a guy talking about Arnold Palmer's penis and working at McDonald's, you know, and obviously having the time of his life that dispels this like, oh, Trump is going to do all these X, Y, and Z bad things. And I was like, you know, that might be probably the best like analytical framework for why this stuff matters at all.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think that's correct because not only the McDonald's thing, but I mean that's part of the podcast strategy, like the bro strategy is aimed at a specific voting demographic group. But part of it is also just to, you know, humanize him and make him seem like he's one of the guys that can just hang out, and then it makes it hard for you to take seriously, even though you should take seriously. Saagar and I had a whole debate about this, but you know, his enemy within, I want to call out the military against them comments. It makes it easier for people to just kind of hand wave that away. And I think between those efforts and the multiple assassination attempts, I do think that's part of why his favorability rating is so much higher now than it's really ever been before in politics. And, you know, I think that's a very important part of why he has such a strong chance of ultimately winning this election. The other thing that I saw is, it is worth pointing out, if people didn't know, that this obviously was like staged and the cars pre-selected, and of course, and all of that, but it's like, of course it is. Like, you think they're just gonna let random people go through the drive-thru with Donald Trump there? I mean, it's a security. Of course, it was a staged campaign event.
Wait, is that a thing? People were like, wait, just so you know, it was staged?
Yes.
The president can't go anywhere. I
know, but I mean, I do think there were people who thought these were like authentic exchanges at the drive-thru as well. But just for anyone out there who needed to know, yes, it was a staged campaign event, because of course it was a staged campaign event, like very obviously.
You think you can interact with the president or the former president on the campaign trail after an assassination attempt and not be pre-screened by Secret Service? In what scenario would some rando be able to roll up to McDonald's and get their order from Donald Trump? What if they had a gun? That's nuts.
Yeah, so anyway, it was not just like random voters who were there being like, MAGA, we love you. These were pre-screened people by the campaign, et cetera, just so everyone understands that's the reality of how campaigns work. There were a couple of questions that he was asked that ended up being relevant. Especially, I thought the best question was about, would you raise the minimum wage? And he won't say yes. He also got asked a question about, will you accept the results of the election? And he won't really commit to that either. So let's take a listen to those exchanges.
Minimum wage should be raised.
Well, I think these people work hard. They're great. And I just saw something, a process that's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to see. These are great franchises and produce a lot of jobs, and it's great. And great people working here, too.
But minimum wage is
recently increased.
So, yes, ma'am.
Either way, will you accept the results of the election?
Yeah, sure. If it's a fair election, always. I would always accept it if it's got to be a fair election. We're leading in all the polls now. We're leading in every swing state, and we're doing well. And it's, no, I don't think so. In fact, they just had an RCP said we're 93.2% chance of winning. I think that's pretty good.
So if it's a fair election, he'll support it. Also, we're going to talk tomorrow about Polymarket and the way that the numbers there have been juiced by basically 1 or potentially 4.
Well, 4, yeah.
Well, there are some indications.
Potentially 1, but yeah.
That it may all be one
4
person.
At a maximum, yeah.
In any case, and then, and you can see how this is useful to Trump in terms of, and then he points to, this, I don't know what he was pointing to, says we have a 93% chance of winning. And this is what he did last time, too, is especially he used that red mirage effect where it looked like Republicans were winning early in the night to say, like, it must have been stolen. And he's already laying some of the groundwork for that. Now, of course, he has a very good chance of winning the election outright. But this is also laying the groundwork for if he doesn't get the result that he wants, saying, look at Polymarket. Look at this analysis that said I had a 93% chance of winning, wherever that comes from. And of course, it had to have been stolen because I was a lock. I was a shoo-in. So you're that rhetoric, and then of course, can't even commit to raising the minimum wage. This is the guy who made, you guys may remember Andy Puzder, the former CEO of Hardee's, the labor secretary, who was like horrible for workers' rights, both in his capacity as the CEO of Hardee's, but also in his capacity of labor secretary. So on the substance, obviously, I think he's a total fraud. But again, on the political theater, I think it's a major win for his campaign.
Look, one of the lessons is that people don't care about that, right? Unfortunately, we live in a world where people are like, you've got more people who are voting Trump, or at least seem to be voting Trump, pro-Trump, who are low-wage workers and or unions, mostly on the issue of immigration. And look, I've said this before, too, for Republicans, all you have to do is look at the minimum wage numbers that passed. It was 2020. I think it was a supermajority, I want to say, in the state of Florida that passed $15 minimum wage at the same time that Trump won the state by 3. So actually more people both voted for the minimum wage than voted for Donald Trump in the state of Florida. You can actually have a red state that did that. Arkansas, I believe, also raised, I think it's $12 an hour. So anyway, if anybody wants to go out there and look at the data on all this for minimum wage and whether you can be like a real Republican, there's plenty of real Republicans out there who vote for it all the time. So I'll just put that out.
Let me just preview a segment we're going to have in the show probably tomorrow with Matt Karp from Jackman and the Center for Working Class Politics. They did a big poll of voters in Pennsylvania. And, they have a class lens, so they were looking very specifically at, number one, what type of occupations are people in versus what candidate they're supporting, and also where do they fall in terms of income level. And what was interesting is actually the lowest wage individuals were more Democratic supporters. It was those, blue-collar, working class individuals who tended to be strongly in the Donald Trump camp. And then if there's also a big divide between, the sort of like hard hat, using your hands type of blue collar workers versus service sector workers tended to be more Democratic. So there's some interesting fissures there, but just stay tuned for that, because I think looking at some of those numbers somewhat confirms what you might have suspected, but showed an interesting breakdown between the different class statuses and occupational statuses amongst voters.
Well, that's important. We talk here, I just said low wage work. It doesn't really mean anything, in terms of what type of wage, what you do for a living. There's a big difference actually between like the bottom quintile and then the second lowest quintile.
That's right.
So that's like people who are basically below the poverty line, and then you've got people flirting with the poverty line slash lower to middle class. Those are very different economic realities. They're very different people, by and large, for people who like actually work and what type of jobs they do, whether they have a permanent career or not. So anyway, stay tuned for that, as you said. Let's get to the Arnold Palmer thing. This one took over the airwaves. Let's take a listen.
This is a guy that was all man. This man was strong and tough, and I refuse to say it, but when he took showers with the other pros, they came out of there, they said, "Oh my God, that's unbelievable." I had to say it.
It was actually longer than that. For anyone asking about strategy, there is no strategy. To the extent that there is a strategy, it goes back to what we were talking about with the whole camp and making jokes about it. I mean, this thing was all over cable news. I saw the Speaker of the House get asked about it. I don't know. I don't have anything deeper to say. That's the deepest I can go is that the campier he gets, the more funny or whatever he is, the harder it is to imagine him as like some dictator who's going to take over the country.
This is why the weird framing was good for Democrats.
You think so?
Yes.
I don't even know if that's weird. I think it's just funny.
I mean, objectively,
it's
he
weird.
talked for like 10 minutes about Arnold Palmer, and then got into this sidetrack about the size of his dick. By the way, there was a very serious journalist who looked into the size of Arnold Palmer's dick and says the evidence suggests this is actually false misinformation being spread by
how could they possibly get that?
Apparently, there were some sex workers who had interactions with him.
Yeah, but they got an incentive
Anyway.
to lie. Maybe he shorted them, They've seen
you never
too much.
know. You can do your own investigation if you'd like, Saagar, and debunk the debunking of the Arnold Palmer dick story.
As the guy, I've been to the Arnold Palmer, can we shout out to a restaurant? The Arnold Palmer restaurant in Palm Springs, California. Absolutely fantastic. Highly recommend it.
But what do they have to say about his dick size?
Well, I'll ask him. Next time I go, I'm going to ask him.
In any case, this is part of why I think the weird framing that Democrats have kind of abandoned was more effective in a sense. I mean, I think you have to also lay out the legitimate dangers, but also people already sort of feel that. But yeah, this is just kind of a weird thing to be talking about at a campaign rally and going on an extended diatribe about a guy that died how many years ago? This golfer. I guess he was from the area where he was speaking in or something like that is how this came up. I don't know. In any case, there you go. If it's Donald Trump talking about some dude's dick for an extended period of time for whatever reason.
Well, it's not a first for him. Of course, Marco Rubio started it, I guess, to be fair. That's what we have, if you remember from the 2016 campaign. At the same time, there was something that the Harris campaign's been seizing on. Let's put this up there on the screen. This was a report from Politico, and it said, quote, "An exhausted Trump said no to another interview." So they highlighted, and we talked about this as well, Trump had planned sit-downs with NBC in Philadelphia, Squawk Box, and 60 Minutes. Why does it keep happening? The Trump campaign had backed out of a couple. In response, a Trump advisor apparently told the Shade Room producers, that's one of those black audience shows.
That's the one Kamala went on with last
We
week.
showed a clip for everybody from that, where they said he, quote, was exhausted and refused some interviews, but that could change at any time. You could take from that what it is. They don't name the person, but I do certainly think it's I don't know. I mean, there's been a lot of, I've seen Democrats try to rehab the whole like Trump age conversation. And this really shows me, I've been trying to do some retrospectives in my head. I'm like, well, what does it mean if if Kamala loses, if Trump loses? And I've been really thinking about how much damage, we almost have memory hold it, that the Biden remaining in the race really did to the Democratic ticket. And I think that conversation about age would be so dramatically different if there had been a real primary on the Democratic side, and if Biden had dropped out earlier. And
I think that's a great point.
So much of this, we're going to talk a lot about Harris's failures et cetera, if she does lose. But I mean, so much of this is on Biden, man. Waited until the last minute to drop out.
Yeah.
No real Democratic process. Anointed Kamala, 90-day sprint to the campaign trail. And the age, I mean, he nuked the vibe for the country for 3.5 years. Like, you can't really get over that. So I really think that a lot of this like retrospective Trump age conversation is just nuked with so much of the populace. They have not forgotten what the Biden conversation looked like at that time. So they don't want to hear it. You know, they were comparatively strong, right?
I think that it's that comparison that's important. And I do think that's an important conversation because, I mean, he is almost...
He's 78.
He's going to be 80 years old in, you know, less than 2 years. Like, this is an old man. No one should fool themselves about that. He will be the oldest person to take the office in history. He's older than Joe Biden was when Biden, you know, was sworn in back in early 2021. So, you know, it is an important substantive conversation, but I agree with you, Saagar. I don't think it really moves the needle because, you know, in contrast to Biden, he seems so much more vigorous, et cetera. And even as he has legitimately bailed on a bunch of interviews, you know, obviously didn't do another debate, bailed on that 60 Minutes interview, bailed on some kind of a town hall situation. Like, there have been a bunch of things. And you get his campaign even saying, like, oh, the dude's exhausted. But he's still out there doing a bunch of stuff. So I don't think people have the sense of like, oh, he's exhausted and he, you know, can barely function, et cetera, the way that it was very manifestly clear with Joe Biden. So, you know, if Trump wins, I think this will be an extremely important storyline because I do think there are some signs of decline and age fatigue and all of that. I mean, you know, time's a bitch. Like, he is getting older. He is an old man. That is reality, and not a particularly healthy one either. So I think if he wins, it will probably be an important next 4-year story. Do I think it's moving a lot of people in terms of the polls? I doubt it. But you never know. We may look back after Election Day and say, hey, people decided like, hey, maybe we shouldn't vote for another really super old guy and went with Kamala in part because she just turned 60, you know, which is, and she seemed vital and whatever for her age. So who the hell knows at this point? But I tend to agree with you in that analysis. And also, I do think we can't lose sight of the fact that because Democrats were so terrified of an actual democratic process, they really screwed themselves. Now, many of us, some of us, were saying that all along, right? And arguing that they would be better off if they had an actual democratic primary process from the beginning, if they took seriously the competitors who did come into that race to challenge Joe Biden, if they had, you know, not just totally put the kibosh on any of the or leading Democratic politicians, the Gretchen Whitmers, the Gavin Newsoms, whatever, entering that process, and then even failing that, coming down to it when they pushed Biden out, doing what Pelosi and Obama reportedly wanted them to do, but didn't expend any effort to force them in this direction, which was to at least have like a contested convention where you have people making speeches and making their cases. Because Kamala Harris is not the strongest competitor. Yes. I think everyone knew that on the Democratic side going in, but they rather just sort of default to her to avoid, I guess, ruffling various feathers because it was the path of least resistance at that point. And now they're in an extremely precarious position, really, truly of their own making.
Absolutely. You know, I've been watching some swing state tape from the governors because all the D governors have been going through. Gavin is so good on the stump. It's unbelievable. As people know, I'm not a fan of Gavin Newsom. There's a lot I could say about the guy, but he's a talented politician, man. And if he had fought for it, I think he would have won. I certainly do. Shapiro, obviously, I still think the whole Obama thing is really annoying, but he's a swing state governor. He won by 13 points, okay? You can't look past that. Even Walz, frankly, I think he's a better politician than Kamala Harris.
Definitely, no doubt about it.
Gretchen Whitmer. She is so utterly cringeworthy to me. She's talented. Whenever she started doing an interview where she was going back and forth about why Democrats are bad in the swing states, and she's like, you're talking to somebody who won by almost 20 points in the last state. So she's like, don't tell me that people can't win big. And then I was like, hey, it's a good answer, and it's true.
I think Mayor Pete hatred is, you know, I have steady, solid credibility in that department. Way better than Kamala.
Absolutely.
And dude, when he goes on Fox, gotten better too over the years. Absolutely. Like him mixing it up on Fox and whatever. Yeah, he's very effective.
So what?
Politician.
We just named 5 people who are better than the current Democratic nominee, which is wild. They never really got to state their case. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.